What we may be witnessing right now is the first genuine signal of how this war could end. For months, every side in this conflict has insisted that time was on its side. Iran believed the United States would lose patience. Washington believed sanctions and pressure would eventually force Tehran to bend. Israel believed continued military pressure would permanently reshape the region. But now something has changed. Iran is reportedly floating new proposals. The United States is talking less about dramatic military action and more about economic strangulation. Israel is winning battles, yet facing growing political exhaustion at home. Lebanon remains unstable. Hezbollah is weakened but not gone. And when every side publicly claims strength while privately searching for exits, that is usually the moment history turns. Because wars often do not end when one side wins. They end when every side realizes the cost of continuing has become greater than the cost of compromise. That may be where we are now, and if that is true, then the next several days could matter more than the last several months combined. Let's begin with Iran. For most of this confrontation, Tehran's strategy appeared straightforward. Survive the strikes, absorb the pressure, wait for divisions inside Washington, wait for political fatigue in Israel, wait for global energy markets to panic enough that outside powers demand de-escalation. In other words, Iran's calculation was that endurance itself was leverage, and to be fair, that has often worked before. The Islamic Republic has survived sanctions, covert sabotage, internal unrest, oil shocks, diplomatic isolation, and regional proxy wars for decades. The regime was built to absorb punishment. It is not elegant, it is not efficient, but it is durable. That matters, because many outside observers consistently misunderstand Iran. They judge it by economic logic or Western political logic. But revolutionary systems often tolerate pain levels that would break conventional governments. So when Iran now appears willing to discuss reopening the strait in exchange for relief from blockade pressure, we should pay attention. Not because it means collapse is imminent, it does not, but because it suggests pressure is reaching strategic nerve centers. Oil exports are not simply revenue for Iran. They are oxygen. They fund salaries, patronage networks, internal stability mechanisms, and regional influence. They help sustain the security state. They help buy time. And when oil flow is constrained, the problem is not just lost money. The problem becomes momentum. Every week of reduced exports compounds stress. Currency pressure increases. Import bottlenecks intensify. Inflation rises further. Elite factions begin blaming one another. Hardliners accuse pragmatists of weakness. Pragmatists accuse ideologues of strategic suicide. That is how internal fractures begin, not with dramatic revolution, but with cumulative strain. Now notice something important. Iran is reportedly seeking to separate economic relief from the nuclear file. That is not a minor diplomatic detail. That is a sign of prioritization. It means Tehran may understand that immediate economic survival is more urgent than ideological sequencing. It means they may be willing to postpone larger disputes in order to stop present damage. That is often how states negotiate under pressure, not by surrendering, by compartmentalizing. Save the larger argument for later. Solve the immediate crisis now. Washington, meanwhile, appears to have adjusted its own strategy. Earlier in this confrontation, there was widespread speculation about direct military escalation, daily strikes, expanding operational theaters, strong rhetoric, constant signaling, but military campaigns have limits. Air power can punish, it can degrade infrastructure, it can send messages. But unless followed by political architecture, air campaigns rarely produce lasting outcomes by themselves. The United States understands this. And so what appears to be emerging is a shift from kinetic pressure to economic pressure. That is a much more familiar American instrument. Instead of risking wider war, Washington can tighten sanctions enforcement, disrupt shipping networks, target front companies, squeeze financial channels, and force Tehran to burn reserves faster than it can replace them. This is slower than bombing, but often more effective because bombs can unify a population. Inflation can divide it. External attack can create nationalism. Economic paralysis can create blame. And policymakers in Washington know this distinction well. So when officials say they hold the cards, they may not mean tanks or aircraft. They may mean time, finance, insurance markets, shipping routes, access to dollars, and pressure on third-party buyers. Modern power is not only military, it is systemic. That is the real battlefield now. Yet Washington also has constraints. The United States can apply pressure, but it cannot fully control consequences. Energy markets matter. Regional partners matter. Domestic politics matter. If prices spike globally, political patience shrinks quickly. If allies fear endless instability, support weakens. If escalation triggers another front, calculations change overnight. So while Washington may feel stronger than Tehran in pure leverage terms, it is not unconstrained. No major power ever is. Then we come to Israel. Israel has demonstrated formidable military capability across multiple fronts. That much is undeniable. But military success and strategic resolution are not the same thing. That distinction is becoming central inside Israeli politics. The public can support wartime objectives while simultaneously losing confidence that those objectives will ever produce durable security. Those are not contradictory positions. They are common in long conflicts. After enough months or years, citizens begin asking a different question. Not can we keep fighting, but what exactly is fighting still achieving? That is a far more dangerous political question for any wartime leadership, because once a population shifts from sacrifice to skepticism, momentum changes. Israel now faces war fatigue, coalition strain, mobilization burdens, social divisions, and familiar leadership battles. Opposition figures sense opportunity. Governing partners demand concessions. Security pressures remain real, yet political capital is finite. This is where long wars become corrosive. Even tactically successful operations can generate strategic exhaustion, and that exhaustion is not weakness, it is arithmetic. Reservists cannot remain mobilized forever without economic cost. Families cannot live indefinitely in emergency psychology. Coalition governments cannot indefinitely suppress internal contradictions. Eventually, politics returns. It always does. That does not mean Israel is about to reverse course. It means leadership decisions become narrower, harder, and more domestically expensive. Now let's widen the lens. Lebanon remains one of the most dangerous variables in this entire equation, because weakened actors can be more unpredictable than strong ones. Hezbollah has taken damage. Lebanon's state institutions remain fragile. Southern regions have seen displacement and destruction. Negotiation channels exist, but trust is thin, and thin trust is unstable terrain. If Beirut seeks greater sovereignty, it must confront realities it has long deferred. If Hezbollah seeks recovery, it must balance deterrence with survival. If Israel seeks security buffers, it must weigh cost against permanence. None of these objectives align cleanly, which means Lebanon could become either a diplomatic release valve or the place where unresolved tensions explode again. That is why serious strategists watch secondary theaters closely. Sometimes the side front becomes the main front without warning. Now step back and observe the pattern across the region. Iran is pressured but resilient. The United States is powerful but cautious. Israel is capable but fatigued. Lebanon is fragile but consequential. No side is fully winning. No side is fully losing. No side can easily escalate without new risks. That combination often creates the conditions for negotiation, not because trust suddenly appears, because options disappear. This is one of the oldest truths in geopolitics. Diplomacy often advances not when leaders become generous, but when they become cornered. And yet we should be careful. Moments like this can produce breakthrough or miscalculation. When leaders feel pressure, some compromise, others gamble, some seek exits, others seek dramatic actions to improve bargaining positions. That is why transitional periods are so dangerous. The world often assumes the highest risk is during open warfare. Sometimes the highest risk is during unclear pauses, when every side tests how much leverage remains. So what happens next? There are three realistic paths. First, limited transactional diplomacy. Iran receives partial economic breathing room. Maritime tensions ease, nuclear disputes are deferred into future talks. Everyone claims victory. No one solves root problems. This is the most politically manageable scenario. Second, failed diplomacy followed by intensified economic war. Talks stall, pressure increases, smuggling networks are hit harder, currency stress worsens. Iran retaliates asymmetrically through regional tools rather than conventional confrontation. This would be prolonged and unstable. Third, sudden escalation through misread signals. A maritime incident, a militia strike, a political assassination, a domestic crisis exploited externally. Events move faster than diplomacy can contain them. History is full of such moments. Which is most likely? At this stage, the first and second scenarios appear more probable than the third, but the third remains the most dangerous. Because all sides currently have incentives to avoid full war, yet none wish to look weak. That combination breeds ambiguity, and ambiguity creates accidents. Now here is the deeper truth few will say openly. This conflict is no longer only about Iran's nuclear program, shipping lanes, Hezbollah, Gaza, or sanctions. It is about credibility. Washington wants to prove coercion works. Tehran wants to prove resistance works. Israel wants to prove force can permanently alter threats. Regional states want proof that alignment choices were correct. Once credibility becomes central, compromise becomes psychologically harder. That is why wars often continue past logic, but eventually material reality reasserts itself. Budgets matter, elections matter, inflation matters, public fatigue matters, internal cohesion matters, and all of those pressures are now building simultaneously. That is why this moment feels different, not dramatic, not cinematic, not final, but different. The loudest phases of war are often easier to understand than the quiet turning points. Turning points can look like canceled meetings, vague proposals, delayed decisions, indirect messages through mediators, strange pauses in rhetoric, or sudden emphasis on economics over ideology. Those signals are now everywhere. So my reading is this. The Middle East may be entering a negotiation phase disguised as continued confrontation. Publicly, leaders will keep sounding defiant. Privately, channels will remain active. Pressure will continue. But the search for an exit has likely begun. Whether that exit leads to a temporary arrangement or merely the next round of conflict is another question entirely. Because peace and pause are not the same thing. And this region has seen many pauses mistaken for peace. Still, for the first time in months, we may have a glimpse of where this story goes next. Not through victory parades, not through regime collapse, not through dramatic speeches, but through exhausted powers slowly discovering the price of continuing may now exceed the price of compromise. That is often how wars truly end.